welcome to the NDTV Dialogues. Every week on this show, we bring you a conversation of ideas. Tonight, as India marks its 66th anniversary of independence, we look at defining nationalism, a debate which was also had between Mahatma Gandhi, Rabindranath Tagore, Jawaharlal Nehru, even Muhammad Ali Jinnah. What does nationalism actually mean to us today? Joining me tonight, Jaswant Singh, Professor Ashis, Nandy, Javed Akhtar and Swapan Dasgupta. How would you define nationalism today at a time when Hindu nationalism seems to have become a bit of a buzzword in your party? Mr. Modi referred to it, campaign posters came up around this. How would you define nationalism?
I personally think that nationalism is an adopted word. It really gets born as a consequence of Westphalia. Before that there were states, yes. And I find some difference between a nation and a rashtra. I don't think the straight translation of nation is a rashtra or the other way around. The other thing about adopting this word that we did because of the consequence of the entire movement of freedom, not just in India but globally, the end of the Spanish Civil War, also the revolution in Russia. And so nationalism got adopted as a phrase without fully grasping the essence of it. Much more native, if I can use the word, was RASHTRIYATA. The difficulty with India has always been, it's been a non-territorial rashtra, more civilizational than more cultural, which is why until the East India Company came on the scene, there is not a single map of India that you can find. There is no map. I think one of some of the attributes of a nation, one people, language, homogeneity, we were a rashtra. Will continue to be a rashtra, but a civilizational rashtra. And that civilizational string that connects us all almost amorphously is the essence of Rashtriyata.
In the current context of nationalism, do you think we can have Hindu nationalism or Muslim nationalism or Christian nationalism?
No, of course not. You can't have it, because I don't know what Hindu nationalism is. Hindu itself is a highly politicized word now. It got politicized essentially post-92 for various reasons. But you needn't politicize it, because the essence of India is the string that connects us is Sanatan thought. Sanatan cannot be politicized because it belongs to everyone and it identifies everyone. Hindu nationalism is a tautological description almost, because nationalism is equated to Deshbhakti, for example. The citizens that live in this geographical territory now of India, they are Deshabhakt, they are nationalists, irrespective of what faith they belong to. And Sanatan is quintessentially accommodative, it accommodates everybody.
Swapan, if you could comment on that. Many say that why we even talk about Hindu nationalism or why we look at nationalism plus is because there's so many identities people want to claim, and they say, why should it be that if you're nationalist, we're not Hindu as well? Why can't we not claim multiple identities? Do you think that's part of the issue here? How would you look at nationalism today? Very aggressive nationalism, some would say.
Look, I think I'll just take off from where Mr. Jaswant Singh left off. I think the extent to which European influences have played a role in shaping India have subsequently been underestimated by a lot of people. In the first flush of freedom, we thought that really we've achieved ourselves. But the extent to which what we are today has been defined by the European influence is tremendous. I mean, just to take 2 or 3 very, very minor examples, and the notion of trustee, the notion of government by trust, that government should exist on behalf of, all the people, is something which is a direct follow from the 1688 glorious revolution in Britain. That concept did not exist in India before this. Similarly, the term nationality was very much an European import, particularly at the turn of the century, when we decided that we, in demanding representative government, which again is something we got it, must also have a certain essential emotional structure to define it. And it became nationality, and from there, nationalism was an inevitable consequence. And if you read the early literature of the early 20th century, you will find that almost everyone says, what is that silken thread? And they don't use the word Sanatani, which would have probably been more appropriate because it means the eternal way. They use, we are defined by the loose structure of Hinduism. You know, whether you Bipin Chandra Pal, whether you have Tilak, whether you have Annie Besant, they all, Aurobindo Ghosh, they all said the same thing. So that has a certain pedigree about it. Now the question is there a conflict between patriotism? Now, there was in ancient India a sense of nation, you could say. Janani Janmabhumischa. You know, an iconography which was there. A sense of belonging. But did that translate into a vision of a state? It didn't. We created a state. This one composite state was very much a modern invention. So I think really what we have is, on one hand, we have different identities, and at the same time we feel, and those different identities are real. You know, whether it's ethnic, whether it's linguistic, to some extent it could even be religious. These are various multiple identities which we all have. And I don't blame anyone, because it's only natural that no human being is, you know, made up of one composite. It's not the Enlightenment. Well, Voltaire said, you know, the relevant question is that which has a single answer. We don't think like that. We've never thought like that. So I think really the conflict, ironically, lies in actually superimposing an Enlightenment culture on a civilization which is actually made up of very, very different mental components. I think Tagore, when I think Ashis would be probably able to, was probably, he said the real conflict, you see, India, he wrote, has often been conquered by peoples. This was the first time, and he was referring to the British conquest, we have been conquered by a nation. And he called the nation the biggest curse, which could be inflicted. And of course, he was really referring to Japan. Of course, he had a certain very romanticized view of what India was, you know, childlike in its simplicity, etc., etc. You know, some of this inadequacy. The Japanese used to taunt him and saying very poetic, when he speaks of the language of a defeated people.
The ideals of humanity and the identity of a nation.
So I think really that's the basic conflict. We have, on one hand, a very, very strong European influence, and we have the underbelly, which is made up of very different constituents.
Different identities which every Indian has.
The DNA of the underbelly is very different from our idea of modernity which we've superimposed. And that clash, and it results in various distortions, it results in various new expressions, etc., etc.
In fact, Javed Saab, when you look at that whole relationship between nationalism and patriotism, we've seen in the current situation with Pakistan as well. Pakistan's assembly passed a resolution, so quickly both the houses got tagged together and passed a resolution too. So it's all about who's more hyper-national than the other also, in a sense.
Yeah, but this is actually a question that should come later. First of all, let us decide what is nationalism and what makes a nation. Is it the religion? Now, in a Hindu code bill, how a Hindu is defined? A Hindu is a person who is not a Muslim or a Christian or a Parsi. That is the definition. If by any magic wand, all the Muslims and Christians and Parsis vanish, then what will be the definition of a Hindu? On the other side, you have religions, the Semitic religions, which have much clearer definition, who will go to hell and who will go to heaven. Could they make a nation? Could Pakistan make a nation? The answer is no. religion fails to make a nation. So what is it? What makes a nation? A language. We have African countries where they speak the same language and they are dividing themselves. What makes a nation? I think culture. No. You have same culture in Europe, but more or less they are different languages, but more or less the culture is the same. They are not same country. You are a nation only if you think you are a nation. That's about all. If you don't think you are a nation, you are not a nation. You can be put together, but you will be a nation only when you will believe you are a nation. Now let's come to nationalism and patriotism, as you said. When these two words come to my mind, I think of Janus, that Greek god who has two faces but one head. As a matter of fact, patriotism and nationalism overlap each other, but at the same time, these faces are looking in the opposite direction. You have a term like ultra-nationalist. You don't have a term like ultra-patriot. Why? There is a difference between patriotism and nationalism. Patriotism is love for the country. Nationalism is the pride. Love for the nation and pride of the nation. Now, nationalism is also necessary because that is how I identify myself. Benign prejudice is necessary, but we should see to it that it doesn't become malignant. That is how I identify. I am not that. That's why I am me. But at the same time, there is a danger, however patriotic you may be, you won't go wrong. But if you cross a certain degree of nationalism, you can enter the area of fashion. You can become xenophobic. You can become jingoistic. So this is something that has to be there, but under control. Under the control of certain decency and certain awareness.
When you talk with so many people say, look, when you talk about Hindu nationalism, you talk about Islamic fundamentalism, there have been those who oppose it. Why attach religious labels to any kind of, when you say it in a negative connotation?
No, Muslims have a myth. Muslims have a myth called Ummah, Pan-ISLAMIC Brotherhood. It doesn't exist and it never existed. It's a lie. It's a kind of a delusion that they live in. There is nothing like Pan-ISLAMIC. I mean, given half a chance, most of them will kill most of them. so where is this nationalism? You are Hindu nationalist as long as these Muslims are there. You will cease to be a Hindu nationalist. You will become something else. It's a negative approach.